So good evening. I'm Deb Wake, the current president of the League of Women Voters of Virginia. I see many faces that I recognize. I see some members of the current board and some members of the slate for the board that we will vote on at our convention in June. This is a convention caucus. It's to go over a proposed study, and we'll get right into it in the slides. So let me start sharing my screen. And if you have questions, please put them into the chat, and we will answer questions at the end. It's a little hard to see the chat and everybody when I'm sharing my screen. So if you will please hold them and put them into the chat, we will get to your questions. So tonight we are discussing the recommended program, the right to vote. Oh, goody, it looks like my slide's not going to advance. All right, then let me exit full screen and see if that'll. Okay. Let me make sure this is the second slide. Yep. Okay. Now it's working. Do you see the slides? Yes. Okay. Thank you. So our proposal is a right to vote. And the way that we got here is, as the League, one of the most important things that we support is voting rights. We were formed out of the suffrage movement that gave the right to vote to women. And we realized that not all women got the right to vote in 1920. It did take many years for many people, but it's something that's very important to us because of our history. And I'm not going to read these slides to you, so please read along, but some of it I will read. Some of the topics that might fall under the scope of the study are: what specific rights are conferred upon a citizen? We want to talk about perhaps the Youth Voting Rights Act and HJ 459 to lower the voting age in certain localities. The study might cover recent decisions by the U.S. Supreme Court invalidating sections of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It might cover actions by Virginia and other states to restore some of the protections of the VRA, and it might cover mental competency. If you look at Virginia's Constitution, in Article 2, Section 1, it talks about who is qualified to vote in Virginia. And in the elections by the people, the qualifications of voters shall be as follows. Each voter shall be a citizen of the United States, shall be 18 years of age, shall fulfill the residence requirements set forth in this section, and shall be registered to vote pursuant to this article. No person who has been convicted of a felony shall be qualified to vote unless his civil rights have been restored by the governor or other appropriate authority. As prescribed by law, no person adjudicated to be mentally incompetent shall be qualified to vote until his competency has been reestablished. And we do have, it's always important when we have a study proposed that we have support of our members to carry out a study. And we do have support from at least 7 local leagues. And there will be a slide later if you're interested in joining the study, how you can go about doing that. Here's a little bit on our current position. And our positions are on our website if you want to read the full position, but we excerpted some parts that pertain particularly to what we are talking about in the study. So, excuse me, the election laws and how our current position pertains to that. We believe that the democratic government depends on the informed and active participation of its citizens, that voting is a right and responsibility, and that election laws, regulations, and administrative procedures should be uniformly designed and applied and adequately funded to facilitate increase voter participation throughout Virginia. And there is more in both of these sections. The League of Women Voters believes that the civil rights of felons in Virginia should be restored automatically upon their release from incarceration or upon completion of probation and parole. So part of the study would be to address this line here. The procedure should be identical for all felons, regardless of the nature of their crime. So we don't believe that there is a hierarchy of felonies. We believe that regardless of the crime that you commit, you should have those rights, and this is in our current position, you should have those rights restored automatically. And the process should be easy to understand, accessible, transparent, and fair. Information about the process should be available to felons, the justice and correction system, and the general public. I would invite you to go and read more about our position, because it does talk about some of the history, and it goes into how we opposed the poll tax when we had a poll tax, and other voting laws that how our position evolved over time. So one way that we got engaged in or how the thought about this study came up is SJ 272. So this was proposed in 2021 by Senator Mamie Locke. And before her, this legislation was carried by Yvonne Miller, who is now deceased. It was a lifetime goal for Delegate Miller, and it has been for Senator Locke as well. And so when I'll get into a little bit about how a constitutional amendment is passed. So in Virginia, a constitutional amendment, and because in our Constitution, it stipulates that you cannot, what the qualifications are in order to vote. So if you have a felony conviction, you cannot vote until that right is restored by the governor. It is not an automatic process. We currently have a position that says it should be. But the study is to see, should it go further? While we are looking at changing the Constitution, is there more that we should be asking for or demanding? And so in Virginia, a constitutional amendment has to pass once. There has to be an election of the House of Delegates, and then the exact same Constitution has to pass a second time, exactly the same down to the punctuation, before it goes to the voters. And so in 2021, when SJ 272 was proposed, it did pass, but it was wrapped in with an automatic restoration bill. And so the way that the bill was passed, it was a constitutionally protected right to vote that is paused while you're serving a felony conviction, and then automatically restored upon release. That was a compromise, and Senator Locke supports a universal suffrage, the full right to vote, whether you're behind bars or not. And so the compromise bill did pass. There was an election, but when it came up in the 2022 session, it did not pass the new legislature. And she proposed legislation again this year, and it also did not pass. So that's where that amendment ended up. And it was very frustrating for us. It's the closest we ever came to successfully passing it. But it was frustrating because there was support across the political spectrum, liberal to conservative, all sorts of liberal and conservative organizations, and everywhere in between. And so it was very frustrating that it died in a House subcommittee where a lot of bills go to die. HJ 459 is a constitutional amendment to allow 16-year-olds to vote. And when this bill came up in this year in session, it was not docketed. So there were several bills that the Speaker of the House decided not to assign to a committee, or the committee chair decided not to put it on the docket. And this is one of those bills. And because we already have pre-registration of voters, let's see, HB 2125, the sponsor was Delegate Lopez. That passed in 2021 special session number 1. And that allows for 16-year-olds to pre-register to vote. And so we wondered if we might look at the voting age. If we're going in and wanting to change the Constitution, should we also look at age? And I would also mention that at the national level, the National League Lobby Corps has within the last year advocated for the Youth Voting Rights Act. And the premise is that when the 26th Amendment that changed the voting age from 21 to 18 was passed, that a lot of the provisions in the 26th Amendment haven't really been put into practice. And so the Youth Voting Rights Act was to really make sure that there was support, you know, whether it's polling places on college campuses or any of those other criteria that were in the original amendment. And so that's why we have the voting for 16-year-olds in here as a possible avenue for the study. Just to kind of loosely go over some of the governor's actions. In 2013, when Bob McDonnell was our governor, he was a Republican governor, he felt strongly that the process was too stringent and rigid, and that it should be easier for people to get their voting rights back. And so he streamlined it a bit. And then actually quite a bit, because it really did allow more people to get their rights restored. And then in 2016, or when Terry McAuliffe was governor, he tried to make it automatic, and he was sued. And in 2016, they said that the court said he really needed to do it more on an individual basis. He couldn't do a blanket restoration. And so he had to go in and sign by hand all of the certificates to give people their voting rights back. In 2021, Governor Northam also restored a lot of rights to vote during his term. And in 2021, he made it just about automatic because the constitutional amendment had passed the first time in anticipation that it would become law and be passed again. He kind of made it automatic, but then, and Governor Youngkin, our current governor, started out in that same vein, but has really rolled things back. And he would say, or his Secretary of the Commonwealth relayed, that they feel like they're adhering more to the letter of the law, and they are individually scrutinizing each application. And they have added criteria to the online form that includes, you know, what sort of crimes were you convicted of? Have you paid your fines and fees and things like that? The process isn't transparent. It's very hard for people within the pipeline, you know, that have submitted their form to have their rights restored. It's impossible for them to find out where they are in the process. They just kind of go into a black hole. So there is a pending lawsuit. A lawsuit was filed April 5th. Fair Elections Center filed that on behalf of No Left Turns and a named plaintiff. I haven't seen any motion on that lawsuit, but I also haven't been looking lately. But they are suing for the fact that the process is not transparent, and that the process was changed without notice. If we look at what other states do, if you go according to the National Conference of State Legislatures, 2 states, Maine, Utah, and the District of Columbia, never disenfranchise citizens who are incarcerated for a felony offense. So you never lose your right to vote in those 3 localities. 14 states automatically restore an eligible individual's right upon completion of sentence, although it could include probation, parole, sometimes fines, fees, restitution. And then 11 states deprive citizens incarcerated of a felony for the right to vote until completion of their sentences, plus either a waiting period or some other action. In Virginia, it falls in that last category. We are one of 3 states that disenfranchisement is permanent unless the governor takes action. Oh, and the other thing that Youngkin's administration has done, instead of automatically starting the process, the person who wants to have their rights restored now has to apply and start the process themselves. They're not automatically starting that process once they're released. And I would also mention that the coalition to which the league belongs, that has been trying to work to change the Constitution, we settled on upon release as the criteria that would start that process, because we felt that that was something that was easily measured. Some people don't know what their conviction was because there are plea agreements. There's all sorts of things that are involved in the process that the person that's affected might not necessarily know. We've also been told that people who are applying now, a lot of times they don't have receipts to show that their fines and fees have been paid. So, what do you do then? So there are lots of barriers in front of people who have served their time behind bars, but there may be other demands placed on whether or not they're eligible. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the process in the league. Program is what we call the positions that we form and the studies that we do. And the reason that we do these is because we form a consensus of our members. We do the study, and then if the members approve these, then we have a new position from which we can advocate. And there are 3 levels. So if you are a member of a local league and you have a local position, you can use that for your advocacy, plus the state, if the state league has a position, plus if the national league has a position. If you're at the state level, you can use the state or the national level. And then at the national level, we just advocate using the national positions. And the term program can be tricky. So it really involves this whole process, the studies, the positions, and all of that. So how do we form a position? There are 4 major steps. First, we select an issue to be studied at convention or council or by a local league at its annual meeting. And I will just talk about these for the state level because that's where this study would be occurring. A committee of league members studies the issue in a nonpartisan, unbiased, and objective manner. So for instance, we are proposing a universal right to vote, but we are not going to drive it to that conclusion. It will be part of the study process. Is there research to support it? Do our members support it as they discuss the results of the studies? And then the members come to an agreement. Studies will go back to the local leagues and they will individually discuss them. The members will come together. The study committee will form questions that will help guide the discussions. And then if there is a consensus of the members, when it's all concluded, then it will go before the board, and the board will approve it or make adjustments, and then it will go before the convention. So at the convention this year, we have 4 studies. So this study will be approved or not. at this convention. There will be 2 years to complete the research and the consensus process, and then it will come back to the delegates at the 2025 convention. So 2 years ago, we approved 4 studies, and then those will come before the convention delegates this year to approve, and that is childcare, environmental justice, education equity, and money in politics. And some of those are new positions, and some of them are updating the position that we have. And so we do have some positions on voting, but this is, if this is approved, then it'll be changing the position that we have to be a more inclusive position. And a little bit about the schedule. So in the odd number of years, that's when the studies are adopted at convention. The study committee, so what will happen in the convention is June 3rd and 4th. The committee will begin its work. It could start in June if it's approved, early, since it's an early convention. The committee could start work in June, could be in July, but I envision that the first meeting will be talking about some of these things, the scope, who wants to do what, and just trying to set out a timeline and a framework. The other thing that has to happen is local leagues have to be brought along. And some of it will be working with them to make sure that they get these on their calendar so that they're able to fully participate, but also they will need to decide, do they need more information? It could be that our committee will provide, this is where you get your issue experts too, your subject experts. And that's the wonderful thing about these studies, is that then when we do go to advocate, then the people that have put all the work into the research, they're the ones that have the knowledge, and the membership is brought along too, because they have the benefit of having discussed and gone through that material. Then in the second year, most of the research is done, or much of the research is done. And so that's when the committee will start developing census question. The state board will look at it and approve. If there's a program director, that person will help guide the process as well. The local leagues will make sure that they have their meetings to discuss these, and everything will happen in a timely fashion so that it is all prepared for the convention to be approved or not by the delegates. So some possible avenues of research. This is not an exhaustive list. So when that committee first starts to meet and discuss the scope, these are some of the things that might be on it. And this is just to try to give people an idea of where they might fit into this, what talks to them, what they would be excited about. So looking at the constitutions, state, local level, not state and local, state, national level, what is citizenship? Are there things that come with citizenship? Is there a particular right to vote or anything? Certainly we have things through the amendments to the Constitution. That's another thing that could be looked at. Virginia passed its own Voting Rights Act, especially as the Federal Voting Rights Act is being chipped away at. And so we have put some protections into our code. What are those? Looking at the arguments for franchise, what about when women got the right to vote? What arguments were made in support of that? What about 18-year-olds? And are there any limits to who should have the right to vote? Should you be a citizen? Should you be of a particular age? Can you be incarcerated at the time? Are there other civil rights that should be considered? Looking at the origin of felony disenfranchisement, I was recently on a webinar where it was talking about I think it was Campaign Legal Center. They were talking about Reconstruction and how a lot of these felony disenfranchisement parts were put into constitutions at that time. And this is the remaining Jim Crow piece that is sticking around in some of the state constitutions like ours. What is the impact on recidivism if someone has the right to vote or not? we did pass a law that impacted prison gerrymandering. We don't have that anymore. That's where local populations where the prisons are were boosted by the inmate population. And in this last sentence, redistricting, people were counted at their left address. You know, does that have an impact on any of this, or does it matter? And then the last one, mental capacity, because our Constitution says that you cannot be deemed to be mentally incapable to vote unless you've been adjudicated. And so what does that mean? And is that something that we want to change in the Constitution? So some ways to join the study. You do need to be a league member. So we've got we have a link on the website to join. If this sounds like something you'd really like to get in on, but you're not a league member, we welcome you. So, you know, please join us. And if you want to, if we don't have your name yet that you're interested, please email the program director. So that's program@lwv-va.org, and let them know that you are interested. And here I will stop sharing my screen and see if you guys have any questions. Let's see. I don't really see any questions. I see some comments. Does anyone have any questions about the process or the study? You can raise your hand or you can put it into the chat. Well, then I guess I've done my job. And if you think of any questions, you can also send those to the program director. And my email address is just like, oh, good. Judith has a question. I will share my email address first. It's president. Okay. And Joan put it in the chat, program@lwv-va.org, or you can email me, president@lwv-va.org. If you don't, thank you, Joan, if you don't want to ask it on camera or whatever, but really hope that we will get some people interested in participating. So Judith, your question?
Well, one question was, are you going to post these slides along with the recording?
Yes.
Great, because there's a lot of good information there, so I didn't try to scribble everything down. And then on the prison gerrymandering, can you explain that one more time?
Sure.
We got that did get corrected with our last redistricting, or not?
It did. It was a separate bill, and it was Senator McClellan, and I believe it was Delegate Price, but I don't have the bill numbers in front of me. But they did correct that. And so when our maps were drawn, consideration, or the population was considered at the last home address of the people that were in prison at the time.
Okay, their home address, not the address of the prison. Okay.
Yes. Pat?
Yes. Hi, Deb. Thanks for doing this. I guess this is a question I've had for a while. I'm sure someone has answered it. Maybe I missed it.
Sure.
What has been the primary objection to any level of this bill, whether it was, I mean, I had heard that at one point it was being considered if it was based on if it was not a violent crime. But I know that we don't want that. We want full rights for everyone. But what has been the objection from the folks who objected?
Sure. And I will tell you, this has also been across the political spectrum. It's not just one party or the other. Some people feel that you messed up and you deserve to have your rights taken away, and too bad for you. We know that systemic racism is a thing. We know that sometimes the wrong people end up in prison. And one person gave the example of, even though she was found even though she was released and was found that she did not commit the crime, it took her 9 years to get her rights back. And so the process is just, it's too stringent, I guess is the right word.
Thanks.
Sure.
And certainly it was used as a pretext for arresting blacks. Just find something that you could charge them with and throw them in jail for it. Whether it was legitimate or not.
Yes.
So, dating back to the Jim Crow.
Right. And it was within the last couple of years that the felony threshold was raised, and it wasn't very much. You could steal very little and get a felony conviction. And so it did get raised. I don't know if it was raised enough. I know it wasn't raised as much as the advocates pushed for, but and you have people who have substance abuse problems who, instead of being treated, were convicted. So there are lots of reasons that people end up in jail should they have their rights taken away forever, or until one individual decides that they've done enough to get them back. And I would also add that when the marijuana bills were being debated, there was discussion then about what kind of crimes, or something about a hierarchy of crimes. And, who, I can't remember what it was in relation to the marijuana bills, but it's something that the legislature has never been able to agree upon, is what are crimes that you can make certain excuses for the people, or you can say, well, maybe that's not as bad as this other crime. Where do you draw those lines? And the league says you shouldn't draw any lines, that, even now you should automatically get your rights restored when you're released, and so the question of the study is, should we go further? Well, our emails are in the chat. And so please reach out if you have any questions. We will make the slides and the recording available. So once you've looked at it again and you think of more things, then please reach out. Anna, you have a question?
Hi, yes, since it seems like we have a little time, this is not
we do.
specific to this particular study, but can somebody please remind me what the difference is between consensus and concurrence?
Sure.
I know that you've explained this to me many times, but I would appreciate a refresher, and maybe I'm not the only one.
Sure. No, thanks. That's a good question, Anna. So one thing that we did look at before proposing this study is, has anybody else done a study like this? And if they had, then we could consider adopting it through a concurrence, that we concur with this study and this position that another league has done. We can't find that is the case, that no one else has studied this. There is some interest from some other leagues in the study. The question is, would they do a parallel study? Would they adopt it by concurrence? Would they reach out, or we reach out to national and say, we have this study now and we would like it to be adopted at a national level so that it can be used by leagues across the United States. So that's when you would use a concurrence, is when there's a study already in hand, can you adapt that or use that for your own uses? And in the past, where we've looked at some of those, they've been a bit too specific. We didn't think that we could keep the nature of it or whatever intact. It would have required really too much of a stretch to go, oh, this fits our purpose. And so the other advantage to doing a concurrence is that all of your members are engaged in it, through either the study, participating in the study, through the research, or through the consensus process. And like I said, and then you grow your issue experts too through this process. Chris?
I'd just like to say thank you for proposing this. I'd like to see the study move forward. Some of you know me, so you know that I am deeply involved in my community, and I'm outraged about the recent changes to the process. And I hope that something positive will come out of this for the sake of the voters who are being disenfranchised and stopped without being able to proceed further.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
So those of you on this call have a couple options. If you are a delegate at convention, then you can vote to support it. Or if you're not going, but you know that members of your league or people that you know are going and are delegates, you could impress upon them the importance of supporting the study as a delegate. Karen?
I know you covered this, but I was so shocked that I wasn't sure. No other league, or maybe I got it wrong. No other league in the United States has done something about, automatic restoration of the right to vote upon release from incarceration.
No, it's not the automatic restoration. We have that now, but this is a universal right to vote that doesn't get taken away because you have a felony conviction or because you're in prison. And the question is, do our members support that? And so it is more than auto restoration. It is a right to vote that never goes away.
But it's not automatic. The governor has to okay it, so to speak. So it's not automatic.
So every year that the constitutional amendment has come up, we have pushed for its passage. And when I met with the Secretary of the Commonwealth, I told her, we want to change the Constitution. We do not believe that the right that the restoration of rights belongs in the hands of one individual. So we can currently advocate for that. But if we want to advocate for a universal right to vote that doesn't get taken away, we do need to have a study and have member support to support that. So
you're talking a study where you can vote while you're incarcerated.
Yes.
That would be the best possible outcome.
Yes. But at the same time, there are other pieces in that Constitution. Do you want to change voting for, do you want to allow 16-year-olds to vote? Do you want to say anything about who is considered to be mentally incompetent and able to vote or not?
So sometimes the language goes from restoration to expansion.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because everybody could vote since they're 1 year old. So, that's an expansion in some sense.
Yes.
But we don't have automatic. Is that correct? There's no automatic restoration of the right to vote.
So
Not if someone has to sign off and they don't sign off.
right. So we have a position that says you have that we support auto restoration. We do not have a position that says anyone should be able to vote anytime at any age. And so those are some of the things that the study would explore. And so we can currently advocate for changing the Constitution to make it an automatic restoration, but we can't support full voting rights until we have a study with support of our members to have that. Does that make sense?
I think you're talking about taking what you already support and adding a lot more to it. If you support
Yes.
automatic restoration, but you want more than that. I mean, you want to study, we want to study more than that,
Yes.
a bigger piece. Okay.
Yes. And it could be that our members aren't there. But I also know that with the murder of George Floyd and the pandemic and everything that's happened in the last 3 or 4 years, a lot of public opinion has changed on a lot of things. So, has it changed enough on universal suffrage? or the right of 16-year-olds to vote. Oh, and I meant to say, there are some leagues that have done studies on a 16-year-old voting, and Maine is one, and they've shared their resources with us. So if people are interested in looking at the voting age of allowing 16-year-olds, there is some information that, and we could pull that out and do a concurrence on that, perhaps. I haven't delved into it. Any other questions? Then thank you for joining us, and I hope that you will consider getting engaged in this study. I'm excited about it. I think there's a lot of opportunities here in all different kinds of directions, and so join us and get engaged. And the way I see the study itself taking place is that as we divvy up the work and see where the interest is, that's where we'll be looking for leadership, on pieces of it, and working together to develop a scope and a schedule and all of that. All right, well, great. Have a good night.
Question.
Yes, go ahead, Shirley.
Are you going to be doing tomorrow night's education equity study?
No, ma'am. I believe that Beth is. Beth was here for a moment. Oh, there she is. Beth, are you leading tomorrow night's study? You are muted.
Unmute yourself.
You're still muted, Beth.
Robin Smith, a former teacher of the year and one of our chairs, will be doing the presentation. I'll be there, as well as Mary Jennings, our other chairman. So yes, please invite all of you to attend. I think you will. Robin just does a fantastic job with the presentation, and she has a whole career of experience in education. So hope to see many of you tomorrow.
Thanks, Beth. And these pre-convention caucuses are the best opportunity to get your questions answered. And so do look at that list. And like Joe noted, they all have the same link, but look at that schedule and see if there are others that you might be interested in. They will all be recorded, but in the caucus itself, that's the best time to have your questions answered. So if you can attend, please do. So thank you all for joining tonight, and I hope that I will see you again very soon. So have a good night.